What can we learn from the life cycle of butterflies? I repeat, is there anything we can learn from the life cycle of butterflies? Welcome, Vanakkam, Vandanam, Namaskaram. When we were children in schools, in our science classes, we were told about the 4 stages in the life cycle of a butterfly. I'm sure there is none among my viewers who is unfamiliar with the life cycle of a butterfly. However, let me quickly recapitulate. A butterfly, of course, begins as an egg. The adult butterfly, the female butterfly, lays eggs on the leaves of plants, leaves or stems of plants. And at the appointed time, the eggs hatch, and from the eggs there emerge caterpillars, small worms, caterpillars. Caterpillars attach themselves to the leaves of trees. They are voracious eaters. The amount of leaves that caterpillars can eat is really very impressive. The only business of a caterpillar at that stage of its development is eating. The most consumerist member of life in nature, perhaps, is the caterpillar. Well, it will face tough competition from the groundworm, the roundworm that you see in the soil. It is estimated that each roundworm can eat 200 times its body weight per day. 200 times its body weight per day. So if a roundworm weighs 5 grams, multiply that by 200, you get 1 kilo. So a 5-gram roundworm will eat a kilogram of food. I think that's a record hard to beat. However, our subject today is not worms, but the life cycle of butterflies and what we may learn from it as human beings. So first stage is eggs hatch, and then you have the caterpillars. And as I said a short while ago, the only business, the only thing that the caterpillars do is to eat and to eat and to eat, because at that stage it has to grow very fast. So when the caterpillars reach a certain stage of optimum growth, it enters a completely different stage, a stage of hibernation, and it enters a cocoon, and it just stays there. And while it is hidden inside the cocoon, of course it is developing, that's where, against this tight cover of the cocoon, the potential butterfly struggles, and in the process of struggle it sprouts its wings. And when its development within the cocoon is completed, the butterfly emerges from the cocoon and it flies away. Of course, it takes a little while for its wings to dry up, because when the butterfly emerges from the cocoon, its wings are still somewhat wet, so it can't fly. It waits a while. Then, of course, the butterfly flies off, and immediately they would go in search of the nectar, nectar of flowers. Well, very quickly, eggs, caterpillar, then the cocoon stage, the chrysalis stage, that's inside the cocoon, and then the butterfly. Now, what I want to focus on is only the caterpillar stage. There is a lot to be said metaphorically about all these stages, but for the purpose of our thinking today, a piece of thought that anyone, anywhere, at any age can share, we'll focus entirely on the caterpillar. As I said, the caterpillar stays stuck to a leaf which it eats. Now, if you were to ask a caterpillar as to what its world is, the caterpillar will say with utmost confidence that its world is only a leaf. What is the world like? The world is a leaf. Now, that doesn't mean that that's the ultimate truth. What it means that that's the limitation of the caterpillar. Now, why should we mind this lesson from nature? We should mind it because it has something very profound to tell us. Each one of us is limited by our own world. And in this context, it's of utmost importance to realize that when we use the word world, we use it in all sorts of ways and we mean all sorts of things, depending on what our personal background is, where we are situated, which world we are living in, which age we are living in. A tribal person living, say, 5,000 years ago, if at all he used the word world, to him the word would mean only the limitations, the boundaries of his tribe. Nothing outside of that will constitute the world. Come to our own times. For most people, their world is a sect, a denominational church, or a religion, or a village, or a district, or a state. And you will come across very, very few people to whom their world is the country. And hardly any these days, hardly any, and I emphasize the word, hardly any these days who would think of the world as the sum total of everything that's on the face of the earth, the world. I dare say you will not come across somebody whose imagination goes beyond the boundaries of his country. You should be lucky to come across individuals whose imagination is developed enough to embrace everything that is contained within the boundaries of the country. We have of late become experts in chopping up the country, fragment the country, against which Rabindranath Tagore prayed so passionately that his country should not be broken up into fragments by narrow domestic walls. Gitanjali hymn number 35. But we have gone exactly the opposite direction and we've become patriots who are experts in fragmenting the country, playing one against the other. So to such people, the world means only their own little ideological enclave or their own small party platforms and loyalties. And as far as Christians are concerned, it's very, very rare to come across somebody who can actually go beyond the boundaries of his denominational church and experience any sense of kinship with the Christian community as a whole within Kerala, for example, leave alone within India, and of course, leave alone the global Christian community. The Muslims likewise. More than any other religious community, the Muslims are very proud of their concept of the Ummah. Ummah is the worldwide Muslim brotherhood, Muslim community, the global Islamic community in its totality. But to a Sunni, Islam is only the Sunni faction. To a Shia, Islam is only the Shia faction. To an Ahmadiyya, likewise, so on and so forth. Of course, as I said, in this matter, Christians are much worse than Muslims. And the same pattern exists in Hinduism. The followers of Shiva, the followers of Vishnu. Ask each one of them, what is Hinduism? They will say only this part of the little territory that we belong to. So, It's high time that we become aware of our limitations. It's extremely important. In fact, this is something I learned from Socrates. Socrates said, true knowledge is the knowledge that one does not know. True knowledge must include the knowledge that one does not know, that is, one does not know enough. In other words, we must all realize that our knowledge is seriously limited. The great German philosopher, author, thinker, Goethe, he said, the little that I know makes me aware of the much that remains to be known. In the Bible, St. Paul says, now we know only in part. A time will come when we shall know everything in its totality. When the whole comes, the part will give way. Till then, we are trapped in a small part of reality. But unfortunately, given the limitations and aberrations of human nature, we are all inclined to think that the little fragment of reality to which we belong is the only reality. And this problem is most acute in religions. When I grew up being told daily, or at least every now and then, that the only reality, the only spiritual reality that matters is what is known to Christians. But no one asks the questions whether Christians know their faith. It took me years and years of personal thinking, research, reflection to realize that I myself did not know anything, though I was a preacher, a very sought after preacher. The reason I've given up preaching about 7 years ago is suddenly it occurred to me, I'm saying to you most sincerely, it occurred to me that I knew nothing. Frankly, I knew nothing. I made all kinds of noises and I was very busy. I was a globe-trotting preacher, much sought after. But suddenly, I felt deflated. Now, that experience of being deflated happened because I began to grow out of the narrow limitations, the small boundaries to which I had consigned myself. And through reading, through reflection, through very bold and courageous reflection, I began to realize that there is a great deal more to the world of realities than is included in my small little world. This actually changed my attitude to the world around, to the people around, and above all to myself. So that today I can safely say that I am vaccinated against religious and intellectual presumption, arrogance, bigotry, and stupidity. Now, what I want to emphasize, and this is the heart of the matter, it's so important for us to realize today that many of the ardent convictions that we hold are there because of our limitations and not because of our knowledge or convictions. It is not enough that we feel strongly about what we believe. The caterpillar would feel very strongly about the conviction that its world is equal to the leaf on which it sits. But the strength of its conviction is no proof for the truth of what it believes. You ask a Catholic, he or she will be totally, passionately convinced that all truth about Christianity is included exclusively in the Catholic fold. You ask a Pentecostal person, with far greater force than even the Catholics, a Pentecostal believer would say that truth is only in their camp. You ask an Orthodox person with great passion and conviction, looking absolutely sincere and persuaded, he will say the same thing. Ask the member of any church, the same thing. But none of them realizes that their absolute conviction, their zeal, stands on ignorance, stands on lack of wider awareness. And this is the reason why, from a spiritual point of view, humility is the guarantee against religious pride and presumption. Now, most people don't realize that the spiritual idea of faith accommodates and must accommodate a great deal of incertitude or uncertainties. Dogmatism, the stance that what I know is absolute and final, and there is nothing more to the world of realities than what I know or what I have been told and taught, is the very opposite of spirituality. It may be a religious virtue, but it's a spiritual aberration. Unfortunately, this distinction is lost sight of. And therefore, people take inflexible dogmatic positions about very, very limited partial knowledge, which then serves as a catalyst for all kinds of conflicts. In fact, if you ask me what's the reason why religions have always been in a state of mutual conflict, competition, and enmity, is precisely this, that each one of them requires of its followers to be dogmatic about the limited knowledge that they can propagate. Nobody knows the total reality in its wholeness. Now, one of my favorite authors, a Spanish philosopher called Miguel de Unamuno, Unamuno, Miguel, Miguel, de Unamuno, in his very interesting work, which I commend you to read, The Tragic Sense of Life. The Tragic Sense of Life. I consider Miguel de Unamuno to be one of the most stimulating authors, particularly of the philosophical, theological kind that Spain ever produced. Now, in that book, he says, God is the sum total of all that is infinite and unlimited. Therefore, the idea that man can know God in totality is completely absurd. And yet most people sound so cocksure about God. The one thing that they know like the palm of their hand is God. There is nothing more to the idea of God than what they know. And you ask them what they know, they'll open their mouth or shut their eyes. No, nothing. And yet, on the basis of this incorrigible ignorance, people are willing to kill and to die. Now, this madness needs to be called out. It must be recognized for what it is. Compare and contrast this with people who have attained some degree of development and evolution as human beings. Take a familiar example. Gurudev Tagore, Rabindranath Tagore, the first Nobel laureate of India, in his tiny volume comprising 5 essays titled Nationalism, a word that is much in use these days, a word of great prestige. Now, in one of the essays, actually these were talks delivered in different countries, Tagore says, if I have to choose between loving my country and loving my humanity, I would unhesitatingly choose humanity. Tagore didn't say that not because he did not like his country. He was a true patriot. But he realized that there are people other than those who live within the boundaries of India who are also fellow human beings. And he also had this inspired wisdom to realize that in the ultimate analysis, if we love at all, we must love everyone. It is in the nature of love to rebel against and to transcend artificial, man-made barriers, boundaries, and labels. That's also the reason why love is kept in chains. For example, in the Indian context, you are not allowed to love crossing caste barriers. Why? Because love is considered to be very subversive. Love is subversive precisely because love is universal. When we say love is universal, we mean love has the tendency to try and embrace the whole of humanity and not just align partially with a small fragment of it or a large chunk of it. If you have a heart of love, you have to love everyone. Of course, your countrymen first, but the love for your countrymen, the love for your country, should never exclude love for other people. Unfortunately, we are taught otherwise. Loving people other than Indians is these days considered some kind of traitorship. If you will be considered a traitor to the country if you love people other than Indians. And of course, within the country, you'll be considered a nuisance if you love people other than those you are required, prescribed, coerced, compelled and obliged to love. So that love is in chains everywhere. Human beings are really scared of love because love is universal. And human beings don't have the skill, the ability, the maturity, the mental, spiritual power to handle the universal. They're all specialists in small areas. They're specialists in small segments or slivers of reality. They feel completely helpless in the face of the universal and the totality of reality. And yet it's only in relation to the intuition of the total that we can actually grow in a wholesome manner. Now, there are two models of growth, and on that I'll close. One is growing in relation to the small. For example, if you feel jealous of X, Y, or Z, what is happening is you're getting fixated on something very small. After all, that person is nothing. When I was in school, unfortunately, I happened to provoke the jealousy of a few individuals because I happened to be somewhat good in studies. But those who were jealous of me did not realize that beyond what they could see, meaning this scrawny little boy, there were millions of boys who were far more competent, intelligent, brighter than me, and they were completely unaware of it. Therefore, they got fixated on me. That itself should tell you that many of our obsessions, our anxieties are completely misplaced. So, the greatest need that we face today, and in fact, this is the most fundamental need of all human beings, is a need to grow. What does growth mean? Growth involves an expanding radius of awareness, or if you like, the expanding circumference of awareness about what constitutes the valid realities of life. When we were little children, the only reality was the homes in which we were born and raised. At a certain stage, we joined schools, then our consciousness expanded to include the school and all the operations, activities, friends, teachers, etc. there. Then we went to universities, colleges, our consciousness expanded. So as a little boy, I thought my home was my world. When I joined the school, I said, my world includes also a school. Then I went to college, I said, my world includes not only my home, my school, it also includes my college. And then from my little village, I traveled to Trivandrum to study at Institute of English. And I said, Kerala is not only my little village, Kallumala, it's also Trivandrum. And Trivandrum is the capital of Kerala. Kerala is something much larger than I had imagined it to be. In fact, I was not even aware of Kerala. And then from Trivandrum, I went to Delhi to study, do my graduate studies in the University of Delhi through St. Stephen's College. I said, beyond Kerala, there is a huge country, a subcontinent. And then later on in due course, I happened to travel to several countries. I said, beyond India, there are other countries, lovely, beautiful. I live in a wide world. So your perceptions change. But suppose a person stays stuck in his village. His mind does not expand. He can still expand even when he does not move geographically. His mind can move cosmically, if you like, through reading, through meditation, through reflection, by allowing by shifting the boundaries of his or her awareness gradually. It's possible to do that. You don't have to travel physically in order to let your imagination and your awareness expand and embrace ever increasing chunks of reality and knowledge. But what I'm saying is, I plead with all of us to realize that very often the advocacies that we embrace, the very inflexible positions that we take, particularly our grandstanding involving negativity towards others, taking pride in despising others, in excluding others, in denying the worth and relevance of others, and extending that diabolic process to the extent of experiencing some kind of malicious delight in contemplating fellow human beings being roasted in the fire of hell. All this is reflective of our pettiness, our mean-mindedness, which results from our lack of growth in personality, in maturity, in our sense of fellow humanity, in our wider awareness. We are very much like that caterpillar who sits on the leaf of a tree and believes that the world is no more than a leaf. We all have our own chosen leaves on which we stay stuck, beyond which we refuse to move. Let me now conclude this by citing a very interesting example in this light from the life of Jesus Christ. You don't have to be a Christian to understand this. In fact, I can assure you no Christian knows what I'm going to talk about. They know the episode, but they do not know the meaning that I'm going to explain. In the Gospel of Luke, chapter 19, there is a wonderful episode in which Jesus encounters a very well-to-do tax collector called Zacchaeus. Zacchaeus was a man short of stature. He was a puny fellow. So he couldn't actually see Jesus properly, fighting with the crowd. So what did he do? He improvised a remedy for it. He went and climbed a sycamore tree and sat there waiting for Jesus to pass by so that he can catch a glimpse of the Galilean who would pass by that area. Now Jesus comes and he stops there. Let's look at the intuition. He stops there. He looks up and he says, Zacchaeus, come down. And he comes down at once. Now, what is the meaning of this? The meaning is, so long as Zacchaeus sits on the branch of the tree, he cannot accept the wider possibilities of life. He is like a human caterpillar. He can sit there and see it and believe that the branch on which he sits is the only branch in the world. There are no other possibilities. That way he can shut himself out of the wonderful possibilities of life. Jesus, in asking him to come down from the tree, was asking him to leave the limited way of life that he had embraced. Actually, metaphorically, that sycamore tree, the branch of the sycamore tree on which Zacchaeus had perched himself, almost like a monkey sitting on a branch of a tree, on the branch of a tree. The branch on which Zacchaeus had established himself was the branch called money. He was a tax collector, and as a tax collector, he thought money was the end, was everything in the world, and therefore he became the richest man in the city. So Jesus is actually inviting him to come out of that world, the world he had chosen for himself, just as he chose the branch of the sycamore tree in order to have a vantage view of Jesus passing by. In life, he had made a choice, the branch of money on the tree of the Roman Empire. Sitting there, he had certain advantages. He could collect money. He could extort money from the people under the authority of Rome. But so long as he occupied that seat, which seemed to offer to him great advantages only in terms of making unlawful money, he would shut himself out from the wider realities of life. And therefore, the more he earned, the poorer he became. The richer he grew, the more bankrupt he became as a human being. And the desperation that Zacchaeus shows in wanting to meet Jesus, this man who had nothing and yet was everything to everyone, this miracle of miracles, who said that the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head, and yet he says, "Come to me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest." This kind of contradiction that passeth all understanding. Certainly, this quickened a keen and irresistible desire in the heart of Zacchaeus, the man who was actually feeling suffocated by the poverty of his wealth and the poverty of his personality induced by illicit wealth. It is this person who runs ahead of the crowds, climbs the tree, and sits on the branch. And Jesus is calling him out of that very limited way of life. At that point in time, before Jesus Christ called him down, Zacchaeus was like a human caterpillar sitting on the branch. If a caterpillar in nature sits on the leaf of a branch, a man as a caterpillar has to sit on the branch. He can't sit on a leaf. So he has to sit on. So if he continues to stay there, that will be the end of it. He will die a poor specimen of humanity. So a great change comes about because Jesus calls him down. What I'm saying, therefore, is that the real spiritual journey in life is from the very limited life and the limited awareness that goes with it into a wider and ever-expanding horizon of awareness, within which our sense of responsibility and our sense of belonging also expands. And this actually is the secret of freedom, being delivered from our narrow little prisons of almost nil awareness, which breeds bigotry, religious zeal of the destructive kind, which corrupts and distorts our personality and makes us manifestations of darkness rather than light. This is the curse that is now destroying the greatness of India. I'm not pointing my finger at anyone or any party or any religion. I see this happening uniformly everywhere, and therefore there is a crying need for this awareness to spread, that we are today in an extremely limited, shriveled, shrunken stage of awareness, which is what makes us embrace with great passion and delirious enthusiasm certain divisive tendencies, ideologies, outlooks, attitudes, and take destructive and self-demeaning pride in this process of fragmenting a country, the poverty of which Rabindranath Tagore warned us way back in 1935, the 30s. We are taking the exact opposite route. We are today saying that fragmenting this motherland is the greatest achievement. So, all this bespeaks of our very, very limited, narrow, almost embarrassingly, lamentably underdeveloped state as human beings. And it goes without saying that the more we grow, the more we expand in our consciousness, and the more our consciousness expands, the larger becomes our sympathies. And therefore, people who otherwise we considered till the other day as those excluded from our range of responsibility, compassion, and fellow feeling begin to be included more and more and more. And that's why Jesus said, "Love your enemies," because enmity is a product of your shrunken awareness, your stupidity, your bigotry, your lack of personal development, lack of maturity. And when Jesus says, "Love your enemies," he also means grow and develop in your mind, in your consciousness, in your soul, in your humanity to such an extent that you realize progressively there is no enmity left. Enmity is a lie. There's only one truth, and that is we all belong together. Let this be the vision for India. Let nothing divide us as a people. The future of India is safe only when, as Abraham Lincoln said, we cease to be a house divided within itself. United we stand, divided we fall. For a house divided against itself cannot stand. Jai Hind, Vande Mataram.